Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to tonight's special meeting of Orangeville Town Council. Council members, honored guests, and ladies and gentlemen, we're gathered here as part of Town Council's investigation into our current police force and to the option of the Ontario Provincial Police. I'm very pleased tonight to be joined by our council members, Deputy Mayor McIntosh, Councillors Taylor, Post, Peters, Andrews, and Sherwood. Thank you for being here tonight. I just wanted to let people know that, you know, our council this year, I'm very pleased and proud to be working with this group of people. They're well educated, they have multifaceted life experience, they're passionate about improving our town and making Orangeville affordable, livable, and above all, safe for our families and for the more vulnerable members of our community. This decision is in the hands of Orangeville Council, and we're all doing a great deal of due diligence on this matter. I just wanted to reiterate what's on our Town Council website about the steps that this Town Council is taking. We had a meeting last night where Orangeville Police Service made a presentation. We had a public question and answer period. Tonight, of course, we have the Ontario Provincial Police with another community question and answer period. On Monday, the 7th of October, we're going to invite mayors and CAOs of other municipalities who would have transferred into the OPP or have not. And so we're going to try and get a fair and balanced discussion amongst mayors that have and towns that have considered OPP. The week of October 21st, we haven't set the date yet, will be the presentation of the consultant's report. We had it previously on our website for Monday, October 21st, but of course, that's federal election day, so we're going to bump that meeting probably to Tuesday or Wednesday of that week. On October 28th, we're going to have another council meeting, and we're inviting members of the public to provide comments or questions on policing services in the town of Orangeville. On Monday, November 11th, our staff report will be received by Town Council. So town staff is also going to do an investigation into the option of Ontario Provincial Police and provide recommendations to the Town Council. Following the November 11th meeting, at a time prior to December the 9th, Town Council will be making their decision. The purpose of this council meeting tonight's meeting is to hear a presentation from the Ontario Provincial Police and to provide an opportunity for the public to ask questions. Members of council are here to observe and listen to the presentation. Questions and response. Council will not be commenting, debating, or making a decision on the matter this evening. The consultant's report will come before council at a later date for debate and consideration. Please note that this meeting will be shown live on Rogers Cable TV. Cable 63. It will also be streamed on the Rogers website and on Orangeville Council's YouTube channel. Your name, if you're going to be asking questions tonight, is part of the public record. Participants are cautioned to refrain from derogatory or inappropriate remarks. To avoid disruptions, please turn off or mute your cell phones or other personal devices. I'd like a motion to approve tonight's agenda. Councillor Peters, seconded by Councillor Taylor. All in favor? Thank you. Are there any disclosures of direct or indirect pecuniary interests? Seeing none, would you please rise if you're able to, and we'll sing our national anthem. O Canada, our home and native land, true patriot love in all of our command. With glowing hearts we see thee ride, the true north, strong and free. From far and wide, O Canada, we stand on guard for thee. God keep our land glorious and free. O Canada, we we stand on guard for thee. O Canada, we stand on guard for thee. The format of this council meeting is as follows. A presentation will be made by Linda Davis, Contract Analyst, Municipal Policing Bureau, and Staff Sergeant Nicole Randall of the Ontario Provincial Police. Members of the public will be invited to line up behind microphones and may ask one question at a time. You'll be provided a maximum of 3 minutes to pose your question. I will advise you when you have 1 minute left. After 3 minutes, the microphone will be turned off. This is to facilitate providing all those in attendance an opportunity to ask a question. If you have more than one question, you may file back into line and ask the additional question. Representatives of the Ontario Provincial Police will attempt to respond to the question or will follow up and obtain that information. Responses will be provided at a later date and will be made available on the town's website. Upon there being no further questions from the public, members of council will have opportunity to ask questions. Please refrain from repeating a question that has already been asked and for providing comments. Any individual wishing to ask questions or provide comments to council may do so at the council meeting scheduled for October 28th. You may also contact any member of council directly. Our contact information is available on the town's website. You may also submit any additional questions you may have to oppcosting@orangeville.ca. You may view the costing questions and responses received to date at www.orangeville.ca/opp-costing-2019. I now call upon Linda Davis and Nicole Randall on behalf of the Ontario Provincial Police to make their presentation.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. Can people hear me? Okay, great. Good evening. My name is Linda Davis, and as we all know, Orangeville has requested a second costing for the delivery of policing services from the Ontario Provincial Police. This request was put forth in December of 2018. Why are we back here with this proposal? It's a matter of dollars and cents. It's not about service levels, as both the OPP and the Orangeville Police Service have proven policing experience. Both provide, at a minimum, adequate and effective policing as required by the Police Services Act. The Orangeville Police Service has a standalone policing model, which is an excellent model, and it's a very expensive model. The OPP utilizes an integrated service delivery model that best incorporates service delivery and cost efficiencies for our provincial and our municipal mandates. This request is about the cost of providing policing. Every municipality is faced with increasing budget pressures and must scrutinize their programs and services in attempts to provide those services in the most efficient and cost-effective manner. A proposal was delivered to the town staff and council on June the 10th of this year. Details of the proposal can be found on the Town of Orangeville's website. It should be noted that the costs presented to the council on June 10th do not take into account any revenue that the Town of Orangeville currently receives through policing. Regarding grants, municipalities under contract with the Ontario Provincial Police are eligible for the same provincial grants that municipal police services are eligible for, including the Court Security Prisoner Transport Grant. As these are paid from source directly to the town and the hired consultant will have to consider their impacts to the costs presented. Keep in mind that these grants are provided by the provincial government and may be terminated or restructured at any time beyond the control of the Ontario Provincial Police, the Orangeville Police Service, or beyond the control of the town of Orangeville. For example, already the 1,000 officer CPP grant that Orangeville received has ended, and a restructured community safety and policing grant is in its place. Also, the Court Security and Prisoner Transportation Grant, implemented in 2012, has met its 7-year mandate this year, and the future of this grant is unknown at this time. Again, it's controlled by the ministry. Also, Orangeville receives revenue for services provided outside of the community, including dispatching for other agencies and criminal record checks for third parties outside of the town. Our provincial communication centers, of which we have 5 in the province, dispatches for policing only and does not dispatch for fire or other agencies. As these services would not be provided by the OPP outside of the town, there is no need to recover costs for them. The total $9.3 million estimated cost, which includes startup costs, does not include any grant amounts that the town currently receives. Taylor, if you could flick the next slide, please. Thank you. Should the town of Orangeville accept the OPP's proposal, they will be billed on a per member, or as we prefer to say, a per FTE basis for the first 3+ years. After that, the method of billing will change from a per FTE method to the current method referred to as the billing model, or it's also referred to as the base plus calls for service method. This second method is how the majority of OPP policed municipalities are billed currently. Why do we have a transition contract at first? The billing model requires a significant amount of workload data from municipalities. This data will be collected during the transition contract to identify the workload experienced by officers in Orangeville. In year 4, that data will be included as municipal workload in the billing model. The difference in costing methodologies is the reason for the anticipated change of cost after the transition contract. No longer would the town be billed for a certain number of staff, but for their proportionate share of municipal workload that OPP conducts in all municipalities they police in the province. People wonder if the level of police officers will change in year 4. It is possible. The number of officers may decrease or it may increase, depending on what is experienced during the 3+ year transition contract and the policing needs of the town. However, the number of staff will not impact the cost to Orangeville under the billing model. Next slide, please, Taylor. Effective January 1st, 2015, the OPP implemented changes to the method used for billing OPP policed municipalities. The previous methodology resulted in wide discrepancies in the costs among municipalities, which was difficult to explain and defend. The changes were developed over 3 years at the request of several stakeholders, including the provincial auditor and the Association of Municipalities of Ontario, also known as AMO. AMO represents the interests of municipalities in Ontario, and the town of Orangeville is a member of this association. Many consultations and engagement sessions were held during the development period. When the billing model was implemented in January 2015, it was applicable only to the municipalities that were currently being policed by the OPP. In 2019, the average per property cost of OPP policed municipalities is $359. The highest per property cost in the OPP this year is Kenora at $771 per property. The lowest per property cost in the OPP is Coburn Island at $206 per property. Next slide, please. It's kind of nice not having the button pusher. I always push it too fast and flip slides. Thank you, Taylor. For municipalities in OPP Central Region, which Orangeville falls under, the highest per property cost is the City of Orillia at $566, and the lowest is Algonquin Highlands at $231 per property. Up on the map, you can see that for the municipalities surrounding the town of Orangeville, Amaranth's price per property is $336, Caledon's $519, Mono's price per property is $346, East Garifraxa's price per property is $309, and Wellington County is at $420 per property. The cost of all OPP municipalities is available on the internet at opp.ca. In addition to their counts, the property counts for each municipality, in addition to their costs, the property counts for each municipality is listed. You are welcome to view this information and compare the per property costs of municipalities similar in size to the town of Orangeville. We are not aware of any changes or plans to change the current billing model. The previous model was used from 1998 to 2014. In order to effect changes to our billing methodology, Ontario Regulation 267/14 would need to be amended or rewritten at the provincial government level, so it's not an easy task. Next slide, please. It is the intention of the Ontario Provincial Police to take on the current uniform members wishing to transition to the OPP. However, they are still subject to security and background checks. Section 43.1C of the Police Services Act states a police officer must be physically and mentally able to perform the duties of the position, having regard for his or her own safety and the safety of members of the public. It goes on in section 43.1D to state that a police officer must be of good moral character and habits. A comprehensive background check is conducted to review the member's work performance to ensure that the member is in good standing. That means no outstanding misconduct, Police Service Act, or criminal charges, or patterns of adverse performance. The background checks will include an in-depth review of the member's moral character and habits to ensure that they are indicative of that of a police officer. These background checks provide the justification for the good character requirement, which flows both from legislation and from case law. The Orangeville Police Service officers hired by the OPP will be working as members of the Dufferin County Detachment. It is anticipated to have 6 officers and 1 sergeant per platoon assigned to the Orangeville zone 24 hours a day. This would be frontline officers in cruisers and does not include specialists such as crime unit or administrative uniform members working in the detachment. Next slide, please. Response times. The OPP has been criticized for not tracking response times. Response times can be a very valuable measure for municipal police services with a fixed jurisdiction, especially when wanting to compare it with another municipal police service. However, if we were to say that the response times for the Ontario Provincial Police were X, what would that mean when our jurisdiction stretches from Hudson's Bay to the north and Lake Ontario to the south, or Lake Erie. Unlike most municipal services, our jurisdictions can be quite large and sparsely populated. In parts of Northern Ontario, it could take 45 minutes or more to travel to a call solely because of the vast geography. This is not comparable to a municipal police service with set boundaries. Within the current structure of the OPP, each detachment could be considered its own police service. Each encompasses its own blend of rural or urban, municipal or provincial workload. To track response times for each separate operational location would mean having to monitor and track response times for 162 detachment locations. Yet comparisons between the detachments would not be apples to apples due to the makeup of each detachment area. To give you a sense of why we do not track response times, let's look at Dufferin County Detachment alone. The entire detachment area encompasses over 1,400 square kilometers. The town of Orangeville covers only 15.5 square kilometers. Yet the number of officers assigned to the Orangeville zone will be greater than those assigned to each of Dufferin zones 1, 2, and 3, even though Orangeville is only a fraction of the size of the other zones. This is warranted for the town due to the workload and the population that is within that 15.5 square kilometers. The OPP is absolutely confident that we will be able to maintain the same response times that you currently receive due to the fact that the town would be its own separate zone and officers are assigned by zone. Typically, zone officers are dispatched to calls within their zone. However, last year, the OPP implemented a program in our 5 communication centers called Closest to the Call. This applies to all uniformed OPP members, including members that are not normally dispatched by a provincial communication center for calls for service. This consists of members that may be assigned to traffic teams, forensic ident units, emergency response teams, as well as members traveling to and from assignments such as court or training. Our frontline cruisers have GPS systems installed that allow dispatchers to see where the cars are. Officers from outside the detachment of jurisdiction may be within minutes of the call, where the officer from the jurisdiction may be further away. This is particularly true for some of the larger zones that we have in the province. Next slide, please. The OPP is very experienced in community policing. We currently police 325 of Ontario's 444 municipalities on a cost recovery basis. Examples are pictured here: performing foot patrol in Bracebridge, running a positive ticketing campaign in Collingwood, South Bruce OPP participating in McHappy Day, and Peterborough County OPP partnering with a local seniors center to talk about fraud prevention. The OPP regularly conducts community satisfaction surveys for their performance at detachments across the province. In 2018, 97.7% of respondents in the Dufferin detachment area felt very safe or safe in their community. 92.2% of respondents were satisfied with the OPP's ability to work with communities to solve local problems. And regarding the overall satisfaction with the quality of police service provided by the OPP, 93.9% respondents were either very satisfied or satisfied. Similar to Orangeville's current structure, the Police Services Board will determine the objectives and the priorities for policing of the town. The structure of the Police Service Board will likely remain the same as it currently is, with 3 municipal members and 2 provincially appointed members. It has been our experience in past amalgamations that the amalgamating service has been able to keep the same Police Services Board. Most importantly, the detachment commander will work with Orangeville's Police Service Board in maintaining or establishing local community programs, including those already in place here in the town of Orangeville. Next slide, please, Taylor. Like the previous slide, the Dufferin Detachment is no different, involving themselves in activities in and around the communities that they police. Up at the top left, from the Dufferin Detachment, we have Constable Shannon Gordanier participating in the Shelburne Polar Dip in support of the Special Olympics. At the top right, we have Dufferin Detachment officers participating in local hockey tournaments. The bottom left, this photo was taken from the annual Dufferin OPP Fall Classic Hockey Tournament, where teams from Dufferin OPP, Caledon OPP, and Peel Regional Police participate to raise money for local food banks. This event is scheduled to run again this year, and it will be the 9th annual. Over the past 8 years, this tournament has raised over $15,000 for local charities. The center picture shows the Dufferin OPP contingent participating in the torch run for Special Olympics. And in the bottom right is a picture of Staff Sergeant Randall donating fundraising proceeds in the form of gift cards to the Shelburne Food Bank. Next picture, or next slide, please, which happens to be more pictures. OPP detachments, including Dufferin County, have school resource officers that visit local elementary and secondary schools to interact with the students. They often teach, provide an ear to listen, and guide, as well as build relationships for our future leaders. 2 popular programs delivered in schools are the DARE program, DARE standing for Drugs, Abuse, Resistance Education, and the newer KIDS program, KIDS standing for Knowledge, Issues, Decisions, Supports. In the proposal for Orangeville, a second school resource officer has been included in the Dufferin County Detachment complement to include and support the schools in Orangeville. Next slide, please, Taylor. Thank you. Throughout the province and within our ranks, OPP values diversity and inclusion. The top left is an image of some of our police members. The top right shows London OPP visiting a local Islamic center. At the bottom of left is a picture of OPP recruits learning about Indigenous culture from our Indigenous Policing Bureau. And at the bottom right, the OPP is celebrating with pride in Huntsville. Next slide, please. The OPP, both locally and corporately, forms partnerships with different organizations throughout the province to support common goals. Shown at the top is the OPP partnering with MedicAlert to assist people within the vulnerable population, such as those with Alzheimer's or autism. The top right depicts a situation table. The Dufferin County OPP sits on the Dufferin situation table, as does Orangeville Police Service, partnering with other community service organizations to provide assistance to residents living in high-risk situations. At the bottom left is Haldeman OPP with their Mobile Crisis Rapid Response Team. This team partners mental health workers with OPP officers to respond to calls where additional and immediate mental health resources could be beneficial. And at the bottom right is South Bruce OPP partnering with MAD, Mothers Against Drunk Driving, to kick off the Red Ribbon Ride campaign in Kincardine. Next slide, please. In closing, I would like to suggest that Council does their homework. I know concerns are being raised, including last night, with other municipalities currently policed by the OPP. If you're concerned about the rising costs in Leamington, then go online and check it out. You will see that they are a community that benefited by the implementation of the billing model. In 2014, their policing costs were $6.1 million, equivalent to $542 per property. In 2018, their annual cost is still below $4.9 million, equivalent to $427 per property. The 2018 totals do not include revenues or grants and have yet to be reconciled to actual values. If you would like to see other municipal police service costs, Google financial information returns from the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing. Here you can view municipal policing costs for OPP policed communities and non-OPP policed communities, up to 2018, including for the town of Orangeville. If you click on tab 40 of any of the consolidated statements of operations, which are basically their expenses, you will find the policing and court security expenditures for all of the municipalities in the province. If you would like to see what Orangeville's workload or what their portion would be compared to the municipal workload of the OPP, we have a tool available on the internet where your municipality or any municipality can enter their calls for service and see how much this would impact their costs under the billing model. Your police service is on the same records management system as the Ontario Provincial Police, so the exercise is very straightforward to complete. There are many other resources available online and at opp.ca that can expand on the many different services provided by the OPP. However, we're here tonight in person to take any questions that you may have about our organization and the proposal that was made to the town of Orangeville. I hope that we will be able to answer all of your questions. However, in the event that we cannot, as His Worship stated, we will be sure to follow up and provide the answer directly to the town to be posted on the town website. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda. So now is the opportunity to open the floor up for questions. Just wanted to remind you that Linda Davis is the costing analyst, so she would be the numbers person, and Nicole Randall is the operations detachment leader here in Dufferin County. So if there's specific operational questions that you have, I suggest you direct them to Ms. Randall. We have 2 microphones. Any questions from the audience? Just state your name and where you live, please.
Tina Hinsberger. I live in Orangeville. Orangeville Police Service has a dedicated canine team, a dedicated beat officer, a dedicated school resources officer, and a dedicated library foot patrol. Would all of these be enhancements over and above your base costs?
Are you okay with that answering?
Yes, Christine.
Canine, foot patrol, school resource officers are all included. I can't remember what the 4th one was.
The dedicated beat officer who walks the beat in Orangeville downtown.
Which equivalent to foot patrol in our language. Those are all part of the regular service delivery. As mentioned, that the local programs that you have in place now would also be part of your service delivery with the Ontario Provincial Police.
So that would be within that base number, that base?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. I have more questions if nobody else.
Okay, nobody else is lined up. Go right ahead.
St. Mary's decided to amalgamate with Stratford in 2018 due to a dissatisfaction with the significantly reduced visibility in the community after OPP took over. Also, St. Mary's Town Council never received any response time data for calls. Amherstburg decided to turn down OPP's proposal due to a discomfort with the lack of available information about actual costing. They opted instead for an amalgamation with Windsor Police Service, despite the fact that they are not neighboring communities. The town of LaSalle is between the two. What is our recourse if we have dismantled our police services and become subsequently dissatisfied with the cost and/or service that the OPP provides?
I can attest to St. Mary's moving to Strathroy for policing services. Amherstburg, we never did provide a costing for, so they never turned down our costing. And Orangeville's options would be the same under the Police Services Act to either form their own police service, to join with a neighboring police service. It has been proven that you don't have to be contiguous to join with them, as St. Mary's was sort of precedent in that example. So they are all outlined in the Police Services Act what their courses of action could be.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Gristo.
Well, my question is for the panel there. I have seen or read that other municipalities are considering or have transitioned away from the OPP service. Are you able to provide the reasons for this? And are you in consultation with these other detachments as to the reasons why?
The two municipalities that have recently disbanded from the OPP are St. Mary's and Perth South, both in Western region, and I cannot tell you their reasons for disbanding. I could, if you, I suggest that it would be best to speak to the municipalities for their reasons why they disbanded.
So you're not able to give any reasons?
No, sir, I'm not. I'm not familiar with those portfolios. I never worked on them.
And it's okay, you have others.
Next question, please.
Hi, Stephanie Monforts. I live in Orangeville. Just one question. You do have, because you have this new model of the closest car for the call, you obviously have a GPS tracking system on the vehicles to know where all your officers are at any given time in order to dispatch them to the closest to the call. So my question is, we have similar areas. Aurelia has the same size as us. You would then be able to see what the call times were from the point that they're dispatched to the point in which they actually go to the call, so show up at the actual site. So do you have that statistic for us? Because we'd like something as a comparison on how long, in a similar size, how long it would take to get to us.
I don't have any data like that. We don't track the response time data. I could put an inquiry to see if specifically in the city of Aurelia we could obtain that, but I can't guarantee I can get you an answer. But I could put that inquiry in to our communication center.
Okay, next question.
Thank you. My name is Jennifer Beauregard. I live in Orangeville. I asked this question last night and was asked to defer it to this evening. Currently, we have a chief and a deputy chief who are present in the community 24/7, 365 days a year. Having to split their time amongst other communities within different county, what presence can we expect of the chief and deputy chief in Orangeville?
Currently, the projected model for the zone of Orangeville is for sergeant and 6 constables frontline all the time. It would be a considered administrative center where there would be a staff sergeant operations manager as well, and the inspector would share their time between the Orangeville location and the Dufferin location.
But no chief or deputy chief, correct?
No, we do not have a chief or a deputy chief. The inspector would be the detachment commander.
Next question.
Tina Hinsperger. Can you tell me how many officers are actually working on the road today covering the 1,486 square kilometers of Dufferin County? And are any of these officers on overtime today? Are these officers solely dedicated to Dufferin County?
Okay, if we could do one question at a time.
Sure.
The
So
first question was?
How many officers are actually working on the road today in Dufferin County?
Right now, there's 3 officers, a sergeant, and 3 constables. 3 officers, a sergeant, and 2 constables. Today, there was a sergeant and 3 constables working on the road. None of them were working overtime.
Okay. And are these officers solely dedicated to Dufferin County, or do they need to divide their time with other
No,
jurisdictions?
they're assigned to their zones working within Dufferin County.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Your name and where you live?
My name is Ann Wellwood, 14 Zina Street, Orangeville. Our chief of police has spoken very highly of the integrity and skill of the members of the OPP, and I take him at his word. My concerns are with respect to the organization and the hierarchy in which we would be caught up as one of the areas in the detachment. I think that local decisions are best made locally. As a former member of the Orangeville Police Services Board, I know how important it is to have civilian oversight in place for police services. You've indicated that the police boards would continue as they now are. If that were the case, but we have no police chief, we have no deputy police chief, we have 0.58 of an inspector who's dealing with other areas, how realistic is it to suppose that we're going to be able to communicate our concerns on a timely basis and to obtain answers for our local considerations?
You could expect, first of all, the inspector at the Dufferin County Detachment would be considered your chief of police. Their time would definitely be shared throughout the Dufferin County Detachment. However, they are still responsible for reporting to the Police Service Board, just as your chief is currently responsible for responding to the Police Service Board, and they would meet on a regular basis. I believe that adequacy standard states that they must meet a minimum of 4 times a year, but in most situations, I believe that they meet monthly.
Our board right now meets once a month, sometimes twice a month, and when needed, so that the chief and deputy chief can answer to the board for concerns that come up. I've been advised reliably that the OPP is looking at a different model. Next year, when there could be up to 10 boards within one detachment, 4 meetings a year, fewer members of a board, seems to me to be fairly inadequate to communicate the concerns of a community.
Well, that was question number 2, so I'm going to step in.
That was number 2. And I'll have number 3, but not right now.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the question in that I heard a statement, but if there's a question to respond to, could you please repeat it?
Are you aware of a possibility of a change to the situation where boards would be amalgamated, or not amalgamated, but within one detachment, so that we might have only 4 meetings in a year with fewer representatives and less time to deal with the concerns of our community?
I'm aware that currently under the new Police Services Act that there's regulations that are being drafted by the government. It's my understanding that they don't expect those regulations to be completed until 2021. And part of those regulations will outline what the constitution of a police services board should be for each detachment. Currently, the outline is 1 police services board per detachment area if accepted by the communities. That being said, if there's only 1 police services board, I'm happy to meet with them when at the call of the chair of the Police Services Board. It's the minimum number of meetings that we're to have is 4 times a year. There's no maximum to that. So answering to the community, I answer quite often to the communities in the 5 different police service boards that I answer to now, and to the communities that I answer to. And I go to different meetings at different times. So I'm, 15, 20 meetings a year. Is that helpful?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Also, I just wanted to weigh in that this changes to the Police Services Act are by the provincial government. The OPP really is a stakeholder and will be part of the discussion, but this is a provincial government decision that will be made. Next question, please.
Hello. Thank you for coming tonight to answer our questions. My name is Brenda Kioma, and I'm an Orangeville resident. I have a few questions, so I'll do my one and line up again, so you'll see me again. Anyways, it's about the bylaws, and does the OPP write parking tickets on behalf of the town, giving the revenue 100% to the town or not? And if not, do we have to pay for that? And if we do pay for that, do you give the revenue to the town 100% or not?
So I'll speak to whether or not we write bylaw tickets, and Linda will speak to where the money goes.
Okay.
We work with the Police Services Board, and at the request of the Police Services Board, we will enforce different bylaws. We do currently, at Dufferin Detachment, enforce parking bylaws and other bylaws in the communities where we are. We have a number of different parking tickets for each community, and we go out. It doesn't cost more for that.
So it's included in your services that you're going to be providing us?
Yes.
Okay. Oh, and where does the revenue go?
As far as the revenue goes, I don't know the answer, but I do know that I have a specialist in the audience. I do believe, and please, Catherine, correct me if I'm wrong, for municipal bylaw infractions, the revenue does go back to the town. Is that correct? Oh, we don't even collect it. It goes directly to the town.
Okay, that's good to know. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
This other question is, I think I raised this issue many times before with the panel. My question is, why 3 and 3.5 year contract? And my point here is, once you dismantle your own police force, it'll be very tough to get back and very costly.
What's your question, sir?
My question is, why 3 and 3.5 years and no more than that on the contract?
Sorry,
The
three, what are you talking about?
The transition
That
contract.
transition contract.
Okay.
The transition contract, as I stated earlier, is required primarily to collect workload data. We use 2 systems primarily for our billing purposes. One is an activity reporting system, and the other is the niche records management system, which the town of Orangeville also uses. The daily activity reporting system tells us where officers are working, when they're working there, how long they're working there, and what they're doing there. So for example, if they're investigating an assault occurrence, it will tell us what municipality they're working in, how long they're working on that assault, and where they are, what municipality they're in, what they're doing, and how long that they're there, how long it's taking them for them to investigate that. All of this information makes up part of the data that's used for our billing model, and that's why we need the transition contract for 3+ years.
Next question.
Trevor Castiglione, Orangeville. Since you brought up the Leamington subject, my question to you is, the officials in Leamington have stated, and being that it's a community similar in population to ours, size and so on, the officials of Leamington are currently looking into other policing avenues other than OPP because, and I quote what they have said, OPP is currently and constantly leaving Leamington itself with 1 unit. They are being called out to other areas and not covering the town of Leamington, whatever you want to call it, Leamington. And how do we know that something like that's not just going to happen here, that all of the units are going to be pulled out the exact same way as Leamington?
I cannot verify that the units have all been pulled out of Leamington. If you would like me to follow up with that, I will. I think what Leamington is looking for perhaps maybe a standalone police service like Orangeville Police does currently. We do not offer that service.
Sir.
Thank you. My name is Noel Ramsey at 15 Feed Street here in Orangeville. You mentioned that Caledon is on the billing model. I would assume they would have gone through the transition contract as well. And my question is
That is not correct.
Oh, it's not?
Caledon was being policed by the OPP on January 1st, 2015, when the billing model was implemented. So they were on the billing model right away.
Okay, so sorry, my real question was, you mentioned at the beginning in the presentation that you do customer surveys, or I'm not sure if it's customers the right word, but you do surveys on how much people feel safe and how satisfied they are. Do you have any feedback on Caledon, because they're a close neighbor and we could probably relate to that?
I would be able to get that for you because we do community satisfaction surveys for all of our detachment areas.
Thank you.
Next question.
Tina Hinsberger, Orangeville. Looking forward, what does your OPP billing model cover? I know calls for service are not part of the base cost, so what does the base cost cover? What can we expect to pay when we move to the billing model?
Base services cost basically refer to proactive policing, your administrative. I'm going to open up my presentation here. The legislative activities that are required, like crime prevention, the availability of an officer, the availability of an officer to respond with all of the resources required 24 hours a day, proactive policing, training, administrative duties, and supervisory positions are covered by the base service level.
And then every time we call in, that would be an additional cost because the calls for service is under that base cost according to your slide.
Calls for service are, there are certain calls for service that are tracked in the records management system that are considered reactive calls for service. Reactive calls for service will be measured and counted to make up the calls for service portion of the statement. And a municipality that's currently in the billing model, they pay their proportionate share of the total calls for service.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
I have a couple of questions, but I'd like to piggyback on your question around satisfaction surveys. In your presentation, you talked about the fact that the spirit and the type of force that you have kind of negates some apple-to-apple comparisons because things are quite diverse in different places. Can you speak a little bit in terms of how you conduct your satisfaction surveys? Because if they're not apple-to-apple comparisons, I found the numbers brilliant and very, very high. So I'm just curious if you could elaborate a little bit on how you conduct non-apple-to-apple satisfaction surveys.
Once upon a time, we did do the community satisfaction surveys in-house ourselves. However, now we have a company that performs those surveys for us. They have specific rules and regulations about who they contact, how they contact them. They split the results up that they give to us by demographics, sometimes by the people that are answering the calls. They're random phone calls that are made by this company, and I'd be pleased to provide more details about this company that does these community satisfaction surveys for us.
Thank you. I understand that you had a brief period of time to do your presentation, but might you be able to pull out perhaps a comparative sample number of something that looks like Orangeville?
In terms of the makeup of the community?
Community and satisfaction and basically apples to apples.
Our surveys are done at a detachment level, I believe, not at a municipal level. So I could provide it at a detachment level that would probably have multiple communities within it. Or like I said, I could also provide Caledon, which I'm not sure if that's equivalent.
I guess that's what I'm looking for, is a similar municipal example that you don't have.
If you have a specific detachment that you would like us to provide, we could do that.
Next question.
Hi again, Brenda Kioma, Orangeville. Second question I have for the night is our office, our station on Sea Line, which would become your satellite office, right? What I'd like to know is, let me just see, will there be, this is a two-part question about the office. Will there be an active criminal investigations bureau in our C-Line satellite office as there is now with our Orangeville Police Services? As well, we have this service where you can meet people anytime to exchange things, to exchange your children, meet a hostile person. They're always open 24/7. Will something like that still be available 24/7? As well, I realized you were mentioning about our 911 will no longer have a dispatch coming from that office.
Okay, that was 3, so
But this
let's
is about our
end that
office.
and answer the first 2, please, Ms. Randall.
It's just
I believe
about
the
the
first
office.
question was about an active CIB unit in the C-Line facility.
Right.
Yes.
We will still have one?
Yep, the model that we have now is for an 8-person crime unit.
Okay, so there will be somebody specific for that,
That was a
duty, that
yes.
job?
That was a yes.
Okay, because I'm just asking about the duties still happening at that office, so it really
And
wasn't
the
3
second
questions.
question was about
That's right, the meetup place.
Kijiji exchanges, people meeting somebody for the first time, child transfers
Yes,
amongst...
exactly, yeah.
Yep, the service is available at the Dufferin office now, and it'll be available at that office.
Okay, because that's been brought up a few times on talk lines and stuff. All right.
Thank you. Next question.
Okay, my next question is, and this is a concern of mine, is my understanding by your presentation there that all the officers and staff, they have to resign their position. What guarantees is there that they will be rehired by the Ontario Provincial Police?
As I mentioned in the presentation, it is the intention to hire all of the uniformed members of Orangeville Police Service. However, there will have to go through background and security checks, and I cannot tell you if there's a guarantee as a result of that, that they will be offered employment.
So what you're telling me, there is no guarantees?
That's correct. Next question.
Good evening, Kim Reed here from Orangeville. The Orangeville Police currently have a front desk that is staffed from 8 in the morning till 10 at night. What hours will the satellite detachment office desk be staffed?
Currently, the Dufferin office is staffed from 8:30 to 4:30. If there's a desire for the community to have it staffed until 10 o'clock at night, then that's what we'll do.
And is that where Orangeville residents would have to go from, if OPP took over, to get their criminal records checks done? Or could we have it done in Orangeville?
No, you could go to Orangeville to have your criminal record check done. Just a word on criminal record checks for the OPP. The OPP is currently working on an online electronic system, so you wouldn't have to actually attend at any office to apply for your criminal record check. You can apply online for it.
Right.
The only
Great.
time you would have to attend at an office to get your criminal record check or to have something with your criminal record check is if you need to have elimination prints done, and that would be done by appointment.
Okay, thank you.
Next question.
Noel Ramsey. In the transition contracts in the first 3 years, I'm assuming you got data from Orangeville because you're using 42 full-time equivalents for that. So that would be providing base service, hopefully with the Orangeville police officers that have transferred over, base service plus the community service activities. In that transition contract, should any of the officers become, disabled or be off on sick leave, stress leave, or anything like that, the remaining officers there would have to backfill their roles, whether it be community activities or patrol activities. My question is, when they have to backfill, in this type of arrangement contract, when they have to backfill, they may be incurring overtime because basically they're filling in for their partners that are off ill. Would Orangeville be charged additional charges for overtime, or is this contract net?
In our billing model, if overtime is incurred for backfill purposes, they are not charged overtime, they are charged straight time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next question.
Sir, if I could also add to that when officers become unable to work the front line, we make every effort to accommodate them to work within the building. So there's always the ability to change roles and to have an officer perform a different role within the building. So it's not like the officer's not going to be there. We just reassign duties.
Thank you. Next question.
Mr. Ford announced in May that he was cutting $46 million from your budget. How will that impact the service you provide to the municipalities? Will municipalities need to pay more to assist OPP with providing adequate service? And what happens when the next premier comes into power and decides to further cut your budget?
I'd like to answer the second question first, because I have no idea what will happen when the next premier comes into service, and if they decide to cut services in addition. As far as the more recent announcement that was made by Premier Ford, this is not a unique situation for the OPP. We have dealt with budget cuts before, financial constraints in previous years. As part of our ongoing efforts to be fiscally responsible, our two main areas for budget implications will not be through frontline service delivery. We're first of all looking at cost efficiency in procurements, and a 10% reduction in ODOE costs is one of the strategies we're looking to manage those savings. The other is also from workforce efficiency.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next question.
Once again, my question is around the satellite idea of what our detachment will become. I want to just clarify, you mentioned that if we needed someone at the desk longer, that there would be an accommodation made. Are you saying there would be a further cost to that accommodation taking place?
No, what I'm saying is that we would realign the personnel and they would not all work day shift. Some would work days and some would work afternoons.
Okay, thank you. So I'm going to proceed with my question. I understand that the satellite detachment in Orangeville will be an extension of the Dufferin detachment, and its cost of maintaining it and operating it would be the sole responsibility of the town. I know that there's a number of detachments, satellite detachments that were closed after the OPP took over. Mono, Caledon Village, Snellgrove, Grand Valley, Beaton, etc. Is there any guarantee that once you take over the satellite site in Orangeville would not be closed?
I'd like to address the word satellite office. Satellite office is a word that we use when we have more than one location that we operate out of. In this instance, this building is a large building and will house a large number of officers. When the OPP closes satellite offices, so to speak, they usually are smaller storefront offices that are populated by an officer through the daytime, and they're considered no longer efficient. In this case, probably what will happen is that the Orangeville office would become the administrative center and the Primrose office would become the satellite, just because of economies of scale. There's more people in Orangeville, therefore it makes more sense to have the administrative center there. Is that helpful?
Thank you. Next question.
Hello, auxiliary police. We have a great auxiliary police team. We do, don't we? And you haven't mentioned anything like that. I did see a picture. One guy had said auxiliary on your pictures. So do you have auxiliary police? Will you be taking our auxiliary police? I've seen you in all the pictures and you made sure you commented that you're at events. Is that all free volunteer work like our auxiliary police does?
We do have auxiliary police unit. We would be more than happy to take on the auxiliary members from Orangeville. I have verified with our unit that runs the auxiliary program that there is capacity to take 14 more members on. They would just need to go through the training that we have at our headquarters, and upon completion, they would be very, very, very happy to be serving with the, we would be very, very happy to have them serving with the OPP, yes.
Okay, and all the work that you do, that you show up at these events that you're showing on the slides, is that part of your cost, or is that free volunteer stuff?
That's part of our base service level.
Okay, thank you.
Next question, please.
Yeah, it might be similar to that line. I was going to ask, on the billing model, you have base services and then calls for service, where calls for service could be traffic stops or criminal investigations, stuff like that. The community, I think, would really like to make sure that we have the same kind of community involvement. So you would be showing up, I would think, at community events. Would those also be considered calls for service in the billing model?
No, and in the billing model, it's only reactive calls for service, so even traffic stops that you mentioned are not billable because they're not considered a reactive call for service.
So participating in the community events wouldn't cost us under the billing model?
No, it would not. We do not score attending community events as an occurrence.
Thank you.
Next question.
In reference to your slide on response times, last night, Orangeville Police advised that their median response time is 7 minutes and their median pending dispatch time is 2 minutes. I understand that you did state that you don't normally collect response times, but you can understand that and appreciate that with most emergency services, that is something the community does want to know, is have some sense of response time. So do you have any sense of what the current response times are in Dufferin County?
No, as I said, we don't track response times in Dufferin County. What I would like to say is the intention is for the OPP to hire on the officers that are already here with the Orangeville Police Service. Therefore, they will still be in this area, and I would expect that they would respond in the same way as they do now at that time. Regardless of the shoulder flash, they will be here. They will be business as usual. So I expect that your response times will be the same. Your officers will be on foot patrol downtown. They'll be in their zones. They'll be conducting traffic enforcement where they need to conduct traffic enforcement. And if a call for service comes in and they happen, if it's a code 0 call, which is the highest priority, and they're closest to the call, they'll get dispatched. If they're not closest to the call and somebody from outside Orangeville was closest, perhaps I was driving through on my way to get a coffee, I would be dispatched to the call. So I don't expect to see a change in response times within the town of Orangeville itself.
Okay, thank you.
Next question.
The Orangeville Police have some of the most current and state-of-the-art communication equipment. It is my understanding that the radio equipment provided to the officers of the OPP is much older, and that if this is the case, who will pay for any upgrades in equipment as people from outside of Orangeville transition in to Orangeville?
I'm not familiar with the equipment that is used because I'm not a frontline officer and I haven't been on the road. However, as part of your ongoing costs, whether in the transition contract, I believe there's an initial startup cost for radio equipment, and then any enhancements that are made are all part of your other direct operating expenses that are billed, and that's how the equipment is maintained and refreshed. It is not billed individually to the municipalities. It's built into the billing model through your ODOE.
Thank you. Next
I'd like
question.
to speak to the radio system if I
yes.
could. Comment in regard to the older radio system. It is true, it is an older radio system and it's reaching the end of its life. The OPP has planned and is implementing to replace the radio system with the state-of-the-art radio system, and commencing this year, and should be done by the end of next year.
Thank you.
Would that elicit more costs once you did that?
It shouldn't change the cost. No, it's across the OPP, it'll be the same.
Next question.
Ann Torrey from Orangeville. I'm actually up here to ask the question on my grandson's behalf, and it's similar to the response time question that was just asked. He's been through a roller coaster of a life, and we have had many instances where we've had to involve Orangeville Police to help calm him down and settle him down. Thankfully, it's gone from pretty much weekly to maybe once or twice a year. But he was wondering, in situations like that, Orangeville Police has always been to our house in under 5 minutes. I had an incident this spring where I had to deal with an issue with the OPP, and it took over 45 minutes for the officers to arrive. He himself has said to me, if it takes them that long to get to our house, Grandma, you won't have a house standing. What guarantee do we have that we can, in instances like this, when people are having problems with their children and meltdowns and things like that, that we're going to get someone there in time to help calm this child, rather than, like he says, have my house destroyed?
As we mentioned with the response times, we are, the proposal calls for 6 officers in the zone 24/7, and with the, we assume they'll be the same Orangeville police officers that are currently policing your municipality now, so you shouldn't see very much of a change. There may be an odd member that's new to the area that's working in the zone, but we would rely on the existing members that have worked in Orangeville over the years to share that knowledge and information with any newer members that are in that, that are working in the zone.
Thank you. Next question.
Yeah, this question is for the panel again, related to jobs. It's my understanding that there is several civilians that they work at the station right now. Would those civilians will be guaranteed their jobs under the OPP model?
Currently, there are, the proposal speaks to having 10 civilian positions, 6 for court security, 1 for court administration, and 3 full-time detachment admin clerks. So no, we will not be guaranteeing all the current civilians' positions.
Thank you.
So what you're telling me, there'll be job losses?
Next. Yes, there will be. Next question.
Hi, just want to know, because we've come to know our own police, and you'll be placing, and like you say, you're hoping that many will be the same. But how does your structure work? I have been told that, or I've heard, that you rotate your police force every few years. So they could be in Thunder Bay 1 year, and in 3 years they're going to be in Barrie, and then you have to start all over again, getting to know your community. Is that true, that you don't keep your police force in one place?
No, that's not true.
Okay.
It was in the old days, back in the day, before I became an OPP officer. Officers did get transferred. It's called administrative transfers, and they are transferred here and there. In this day and age, it's very, very expensive to transfer an officer administratively. So unless an officer wants to move to another location, we're happy to have them stay at the same location for their entire career. What you will find is that officers will transfer to another detachment to follow an opportunity, such as an emergency response team, dive unit, K9, that kind of thing. For the most part, they'll stay at their detachment, but we don't administratively transfer officers and rotate them around, no.
Okay, that's good. Thank you.
Yes, Noel Ramsey again. The mayor has indicated at the beginning that we're going to invite mayors or people from other communities to comment on this overall transition. But I think with the officers going through the transition, feedback from them would be significant, particularly if you have unique departments that they would have exposure to, like your Marine unit and other crime units, you know, organized crime, all these other opportunities that they've got. The question is, do you have any, in these transitions that you've done before, is there any feedback or surveys that you've done with the officers to see how they feel about the exercise?
There's nothing that we have done formally. I think it's very important that the officers be consulted in these changes. Well, everyone's been talking about service delivery and whatnot, but nobody's talking about the police officers themselves and what they want and whether they want to transition or not. It is an important factor, but we have not received any, we have never done any surveys sort of post-amalgamation to get feedback from the officers that have transitioned. The
reason I ask is I heard that there is positive feedback informally, but I didn't know if in the organization that if you captured that.
We don't capture it formally, like I said. I mean, I know that, for instance, right now we have a civilian member that transitioned over from Midland. They successfully were secured a job as a detachment administrative clerk at the Midland detachment. They have since moved on to other opportunities and now work out of general headquarters and have been given many opportunities by attending mentoring workshops, civilian mentoring workshops. So that's sort of been highlighted internally for us, but that's not highlighted externally to the public.
Okay, thank you.
Next question.
Trevor Castiglione, if I heard you right, you're saying that Orangeville will have 6 officers dedicated here, correct?
Correct. If you look at the model that we posted earlier, 1 sergeant and 6 constables.
Okay, then my question to you would be, can you guarantee that those officers will be here while we're paying them and not be pulled out to other areas in Dufferin?
I can't guarantee that they won't be called out to another area to answer a call for service, just as much as I can't guarantee that officers from Caledon, Nottawasaga, Wellington, or Grey County won't be called here to respond to calls for service to assist us.
Okay.
Next question.
I just have actually a bit of a point of order for the evening. I've noticed, having participated in this discourse both evenings, I'm feeling a little urgency and a little bit of pressure. The parameters, from what I understand, as were delivered at the beginning, that there be no comment from the mayor or councillors and no ability to question. And I'm getting a
We
little
have lots of additional
but
meetings.
I'm getting a sense that there are comments are being made. So if you're opening up the floor to questions, I'd appreciate knowing that, because I'd love to ask some questions. If the parameters haven't changed, I'd like to really go back to the model that we had last night, where it seemed to just be a role of moderator and not providing any questions.
Trevor Castiglione again. Just to continue on my question, since I was cut off. How do we know we're getting what we're paying for if you're pulling officers out to go in other zones in Dufferin County?
When we prepare the transition contract, we do talk about the number of officers that will be assigned to the Orangeville zone. However, our service is measured through hours of service. So when we say we're going to provide 42.58 officers, one officer is equivalent to 1,417 hours. And so essentially, we would expect to provide the town of Orangeville with 42.58 times 1,417 hours. And we're able to measure that with the data that's collected in our daily activity reporting system, as it tells us where officers are working and how long they're working there for. So that's what we will strive to provide to the town of Orangeville, is the equivalent of 1,417 hours per FTE in the contract.
Thank you. Next question.
Thank you. Yesterday evening, there were some questions that started off with around litigation, issues with regard to litigation, and then it expanded to what the chief was commenting on, which was how lawsuits are being handled. But the real question that I had behind this is, I'm sure that you carry insurance for liability for your force with the officers and all that. Should something happen where, God forbid, some of the officers mishandle a situation, or if someone in custody is not treated properly and someone brings forth a lawsuit and it gets settled, I'm sure that, just like your auto insurance, your premiums are going to go up. Under any of these circumstances, do you ever pass back increased insurance costs to what's going on in the community because of legal activity?
No, those costs are borne by the OPP and they're not transferred down to the municipalities.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next question.
Trevor Castiglione again. It's my understanding from the media in Midland that there's been some concern in regards to how OPP is billing when they have court officers coming through the area or certain areas, I'm guessing your GPS system, and you are considering them to be part of your hours to that municipality. Again, it's a concern for me that if you happen to have an officer that's transitioning through the area, and let's say it takes him a half an hour because he stopped for coffee or whatever, that you're using those hours of that officer's transition through the area for the total hours.
That's not true. We do not do that. If a officer was traveling through the area and responded to a calls for service, they would be recording that they spent that calls for service in the town of Orangeville, and those are the only hours that would be used in the billing.
Thank you. Next question.
Okay, the question for me is related to 390 Sea Line. If the town, for whatever reason, decided to go with the OPP, is my understanding the OPP is requesting upgrades to the building to really, to take care of the OPP needs. Does anyone can tell me what the cost would that be? Because I heard anywhere from $1.5 million, $1 million to $1.5 million to $2 million. Did anyone have done anything to really gather the actual number that it will cost? And those are costs that will be borne by the municipality.
That is true that there are some modifications that have been requested. The modifications have been communicated with the town, and I believe that that's a question or an answer, a question you will be able to pose on October 28th when you're able to ask the town that information. And I believe that they're working on costs for those renovations that are being asked for. The OPP is not providing the costs for those.
Okay,
That is correct. Mr. Osmond is currently working on that currently. Next question.
Trevor Castiglione again. I'll break this up into two questions so that I satisfy the mayor and just don't get cut off. Is Orangeville currently being billed by OPP when they need to ask for resources such as a helicopter for searches or anything like that?
No.
Stephanie Monforts again. I just wanted to ask you, again, we're going to go back into your call times because that seems to be a hot topic for me. In looking at some of the social media posts, there's a lot of perception. I'm getting Grand Valley. People are saying good luck. They take 30 minutes, 40 minutes to get there. I'm getting the same thing from the town of Erin. So my question is if the perception out there is that it's taking this long for you to service your patrons, then wouldn't it behoove OPP to turn around and come back to the people that are looking at investing in them and giving them some actual stats?
We haven't been receiving complaints from those areas for the response times. I like to say that if it was on Facebook or social media, then it must be true, but I guess maybe it's not. Those questions have not been directed to us, nor the requests for the response times.
Perceptions are even from people that are living in Caledonia that have that same issue.
Next question, please.
Those would be their perceptions.
Trevor Castiglione again. So if we were to go with OPP and we had a situation, God forbid, like the Caden incident or a Sonia Varashin, we would be being billed for that, whereas we're getting that equipment, manpower, and so on and so forth for free now. If we went to OPP, we would end up paying that overtime, the equipment, specialty services as an extra. Am I correct in that?
No, that is not correct. If they were attending, let's say, a homicide in the town of Orangeville, that would count as one call for service. There's no additional bills for the specialty units that are attending those calls from our general or regional headquarters. Also, you are not charged for the time that they are contributing, especially their overtime. The overtime that is being charged to the town of Orangeville would be from the frontline detachment members only, not from the specialty units.
Okay. Next question, please.
In the billing model, you mentioned, that the fourth year is based on need. Can municipalities who are under this model, do they have a choice of requesting additional services? Like if we wanted, let's say there wasn't a real need for a fit patrol officer on Broadway, but the town would like that, could they request that in the billing model?
There is an opportunity to request what we call enhancements. Enhancements are above and beyond that are dedicated solely to the municipality and are at the cost of the municipality.
And they wouldn't leave. They're ours.
They would be providing 1,417 hours of service to the municipality within the year.
Great, thanks.
Next question.
I just wanted to make sure I had clarification on something in terms of under your model that you're proposing for even the first 3 years. I don't know, obviously we won't be able just for the
name
first
for the record.
Chris Halliday, sorry, my bad. So under your proposal, what would be the minimum requirement for officers on patrol? Because I heard you talk about 6 officers. You're talking about a sergeant probably overseeing, but like what would you be striving for a minimum number of officers actually patrolling on the road during day and night shift?
1 sergeant and 6 constables.
All on the road?
Yes.
Sorry.
Taking into account when the officers have to go to court, they're not going to be able to be out on patrol. When they're at a call for service, they're not going to be able to be out on patrol. The current model that we have, based on the FTEs that we want to adopt, 1 sergeant, 6 constables in the town of Orangeville.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm just curious. The other week we were in Wasaga and we passed the police station there, so we saw it. And we were going to a party at somebody's house, and I noticed a OPP SUV in a driveway on the street of the people's street, and hitched to it was a boat. So do you allow your officers personal use of your vehicles? Why are they not parked at the stations like most people have to do when they go to work and pick up a company car? It just surprised me, so I need to know.
I can't speak to that situation. I can't tell you why the vehicle was parked there. I don't know why the boat was attached. I don't know that it was a personal situation. I don't know that they were responding for calls for service.
I did inquire with the woman that I went to the party at, and she says that car's always in the driveway. They never see him go to the station, and except for bringing the boat out, it's always there. So I was just curious to know.
Our officers are not allowed to use their vehicles for personal purposes.
Okay, thank you.
Name and where do you live, sir?
I live in Amaranth Township. I'm the president of the Orangeville Police Association.
Go ahead.
Question I have is, you said there'd be a sergeant and 6 officers assigned to the Orangeville zone. Will those officers be there all the time? Like if all hell broke loose on 10 Highway or 24 Highway or Grand Valley, is there a chance that all the officers in Orangeville would be out of town at any given time? If the town draws up a contract with the OPP, do they guarantee no matter what happens, there's going to be 1, 2, 3 officers left in Orangeville and withdraw officers from somewhere else so that the town isn't left bare, is what I'm saying.
Okay, we're both going to take a stab at this. So it's important to notice that all the detachments have zones, and when an incident occurs in a zone, that the zone officers would be dispatched first. If it was a major incident, then they would call for support from neighboring zones or from neighboring detachments. It would not be prudent to leave a zone with absolutely 0 officers in it. However, I will never say never. I can't make any guarantees that there would be that many officers here. Also alluded, as by Staff Sergeant Randall, that although 6 officers will be assigned to your platoon, it doesn't necessarily mean that they will always be in town, as they may be in court or perhaps with other duties or at training or something like that. But the commitment is that there would be 6 per platoon.
Second question, last night I understood that the Orangeville station met the provincial adequacy standards as far as what is required to run a police station, I guess the formation of the police station, everything else. But in your presentation, I hear there's got to be some modifications done to the police station. And what is the cost of this? And the town is obviously going to have to pay it. But if it's meeting the standards now, the provincial standards, why is it necessary to do all these upgrades to the station?
Some of the standards, the building has been grandfathered in. So for example, for accessibility, the front counter does not meet AODA standards. However, the town of Orangeville has not been asked to change them because the policy came in, I believe, after the building was built. Once renovations are being made, it is they will have to comply to those standards.
Okay. Next question.
Thank you. So I'm coming back to some of the things that were said last evening and how the chief presented that there were 0 increased budgets and so on. I guess I'm struggling still with your analogy around definitively being able to cost out, size out, describe the different areas that you cover. It seems to me that we've talked about some apples, some oranges, and pears. I happen to think that Orangeville is a bit of a peach. How do we know that that map that had those amounts of money on it per household that don't really resemble Orangeville or our needs at all would be serviced and paid for by that amount when we're not an apple and orange or a pear?
The way that the billing model is set up, as we said, primarily it's for base service. Base service is proactive service, and just the fact that you have a police department with all the resources and equipment to respond. The base service cost is a per property cost, and that per property cost is the same throughout the province of Ontario. So if one municipality has 10,000 occurrences and 10,000 properties, and another municipality has 5,000 properties, each of the municipalities is paying the same base cost per property, which this year is just over $189 per property. So that's how it's evenly distributed throughout the province for the base costs.
No, I thank you for that, and I really appreciate the breakdown because I am trying to make sense of it. I guess I'm coming back to, you both had very similar things in your presentations around community-based policing. I know for a fact that community-based policing is responsive to the locale, and it really is driven, costs are driven by the response to that locale. So as you just described it, you're basically describing numbers of people or numbers of households or numbers of calls, but it's not describing the particular people who live in those homes or the types of calls, correct?
I don't understand the question. Could you rephrase it, please?
Okay, so when I look at Caledon,
yes.
Okay, and I've worked in Caledon, and I know that I've worked with the OPP in Caledon, it's a very different experience than Orangeville. So you're basically telling me that because it's a base amount, that base amount covers both types of needs equally.
I think that would be up to each individual detachment commander to meet the needs of the communities that they're policing, and I would agree that the needs in different detachments and different communities, that they are different.
So because you mentioned there was no comparative sample, might we assume or infer that those costs actually might be considerably higher based on what that individual decides are the needs of that municipality?
I don't understand how the costs are related to the needs of the community, as the costs are through the base service and the calls for service. But community service work is not a billable call, so to speak. It's all included in the base service.
Okay.
Next question, please.
Trevor Castiglione again. I'm just kind of looking for some clarification on something you just said. I'm just going to use a hypothetical thing. If you have a day shift with 6 officers and you have to have one of those officers go to, well, let's even say 3 of those officers have to go to court, are you bringing in more officers to cover those, or are we now just only going to have 3 officers on the road but paying for 3 to go to court?
That's the way it works. That's the way it works for Orangeville Police. That's the way it works for OPP. When the officers are assigned to go to court, they're assigned to go to court on their day shift. What we do is make sure that they're not all assigned to court at the same time.
Okay, next question.
I promise this will be my final question. I received a phone call today by a senior citizen. She lives in Mono. She's about 65 years old. And she was telling me that an incident happened where a couple of guys, they were on her driveway roaming around. So I understand that the Mono is policed by the OPP. And she placed a phone call to the OPP, and she was told that no officer will be available to make its way to the residence. And the reason behind that was the only way we answer the call if somebody break into your house. Did you guys ever encounter any incidents like that before? And she got a little upset over that. And she phoned our boys here, and within 2 minutes, they were there. Lucky for her that they just were there looking for an address. So did you ever
So
hear
what's
any
your
complaints.
question, Mr. Gristo, please?
Well, the question is, any other incidents that you guys are aware on the same issue?
No, but I would really like for you to call this lady back and have her call me tomorrow and explain what happened, and then I can look into it. That would be great.
Well, I can tell you she's moved away from me here now, so I have no recall. This has been about a month ago when she contacted me about this. Well, she's moved away from there. Okay.
Okay. Next question?
Just going back to the community policing that you say is integrated in our base model, so things like going to schools, the DARE program, et cetera. How many events do you have based on that? So, for example, how many trips are you making to school under that base model? How many schools are you visiting? I'd like to know a comparative on what it is in another town and how much of those, like how many events, so we have a comparison.
Not right now. I'd have to find that for you. I'd have to know what you're looking for specifically. And
How many times do you go to school events? How many times you're going to extra, like Rib Fest, or you're going to any of those things? If you're doing anything when it comes to, LGBTQ, all of those events, what are you covering under that base model cost? How many events are you covering?
There's no set amount of events that we will cover. In a Section 10 contract, it would be, again, objectives and priorities of the Police Service Board, and it would also vary from detachment to detachment.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Yes, thank you, Ann Wellwood. Back to the matter of the police boards. If OPP becomes the policing model here, I'm sure you're aware of the web of contacts that our police service has in the community with situation table, food banks, family transition. Is OPP prepared to commit to that level of involvement, either on its own or if asked by the Police Services Board?
Yes.
Well, that's good, thank you. Because that's a very important part of our policing, and it takes thousands of hours.
I know,
in
and
a year.
I do appreciate that, and I know that we are already involved in situation table, family transition place, Dufferin Child and Family Services, Guelph, Wellington Mental Health, the Medical Alert Program.
Good.
We're involved in many of the programs already.
Right.
It's just we're on the periphery of your town,
Right.
so it's not difficult to do the things that we're asked to do because we already have those relationships established. And your officers that work here now, who we would hope to hire on, have those relationships as well.
Right, and they would be in a position to continue those.
Yes.
Right. Thank you very much.
Yes, sir.
Trevor Castiglione again. If I understood you correctly and what you said earlier, you said on average you have, I do believe you told Chris 2 officers you had on and 1 sergeant during the day or something earlier on this evening. Irregardless of that, if OPP is down to what I hear is quite the norm for the current Dufferin detachment of 2 officers in an evening for a 1,400 square kilometer area, would the Orangeville resources be called out to be doing preventative policing to assist the current Dufferin and the other zones for speeding and so on and so forth?
It would be up to the sergeants working both in the Orangeville zone and the other zones to arrange the allocation of their resources.
Thank you. Okay, well, we may have exhausted the questions. So is there anybody else? All right.
You should have closed it off while you had the chance.
Your name, sir, for the record.
Don Kidd.
Okay.
And I have a question.
Okay.
Or a comment, or however. So ladies, please listen up. And I'll put this to you. There's been a lot of talk tonight regarding if the OPP came to the town of Orangeville and policed it. They would use the office on Sea Line. Now, at this present time, and they're talking in Orangeville here, about if there was an incident in the country, is there ever a time that Orangeville police officers go out into Highway 10 for an accident, Amaranth for a break-in, and if they do, does anyone believe that if there's 6 officers on in Orangeville at the time of that incident, if 2 officers left, would they not be only left with 4 officers, or am I wrong? I know for a fact there's times that Orangeville Police do go out into the country, for instance. So I'm just wondering, people seem to be hesitant because the OPP may take officers out of Orangeville to go attend to an event in the country somewhere around here. But it happens now with the Orangeville Police going out into the country. So
your question, sir.
My question is, does Dufferin OPP ever request Orangeville Police to cover an incident in the country surrounding Dufferin, in Dufferin County, in this area, in Mono, in Amaranth, in East Gary?
We do on occasion ask for assistance from Orangeville Police. For example, if there's a call that's just on the outside of our borders and we know it's a hot call, we'll ask if they have somebody close by that can help out. And we also, if we have an officer in a situation where they need some backup, we will ask them if they can come and back up our officer until another one can get there.
Yeah, so it happens now, it happens with Orangeville Police, it happens with the OPP. It's just common that police forces work together.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's just the way the province runs.
Yes.
Police forces work together. Thank you very much.
Next question.
So twice now we've had where the call for this response time to calls and stuff, and you've said twice now that we're going to hire on our own police force where the response times are going to be the same and everything else because it's the same police. But, and I know this for a fact, that in the Leamington contract, you guaranteed that all the police officers would be employed for 3 years there. But in less than a year, they were all gone because of their choice of expanding on to better things in their life and everything else. So coming back down to the response time of serving our community, we could have, even though you say it'll be all our own Orangeville Police that we have now, it could be all different police within the year.
I don't know what the officers would do. I can't imagine that every one of them would pack up and leave Orangeville within a year to move on to greener pastures, so to speak. And I can tell you that when an officer asks for a transfer to another detachment, there is a transition period of 75 days. And other officers would come into the community during that time and be trained by their peers about the community, travel together in double up in units and go to calls for service. And that's how we get to know people in the community and how we get to know them on a first name basis. So there is, of course, the possibility that the officers may move on to other opportunities. And it's been said here earlier, we do have anti-rackets bureau, we have child pornography units, we have organized crime investigations, we have canine units, ERT units, dive teams, pilots. You know, the opportunities are there for the officers. But I think what you'll find is they'll just be happy to stay in Orangeville and be a police officer and serve their community. I don't think you're going to see the whole service disappear.
Okay, I was just curious because Leamington, they all left within the year.
Okay, next question.
My question is with regard to other municipalities that have made the transition and how you have taken over officers. I'm not sure if you'll be able to answer it or if it's really the other towns and maybe the other mayors can input on this if they come and talk. But for the officers that go across, do you know if in those transitions they're leaving their local police force and going to the OPP? Is there any conditions on whether or not they qualify for a severance package from their local force?
That would be established through the agreements that they have with the town that they're currently working for. So usually I would say most officers have some sort of severance package in their collective agreements.
So they get the severance as well as get hired onto the OPP if they qualified?
I think that that would depend on the agreement, because I don't think it's consistent like that across. I think that some agreements may be written that if they're given job offers, they may not have severance, but I don't know what's in other municipalities' agreements.
Okay, I'll ask the municipality then, thanks.
So folks, we're getting, it's 8:45 now, so I'd like to maybe announce we'll have maybe 10 more minutes of questions and then a brief wrap-up. We'll ask our friends from the OPP to have a final statement, and then we'll wrap this up. So go ahead, please.
So Stephanie again. Just a question. I noticed on your, you claim, like on your costing, you have constables listed, but nobody has outlined how many first constables, second constables, third or fourth. So if we happen to have 6 officers on at a time, you might have 2 fourth-level constables, which are ones that have to ride along with someone else. So technically, instead of having 5 or 6 cars, you're now down to 2 people per car. So can you please let me know what your plan is if you were to come in here? What is the expertise? What level of constable would they be planning on bringing in?
We plan on amalgamating the existing officers from the Orangeville Police Service who wouldn't need to be in a probationary capacity. They would be able to drive in their own cars. The OPP does recommend that officers double up after 10 p.m. And most of the time when we have a call for service after 10 p.m., it's a 2-person call anyway. So it's cost efficient to have 2 officers in 1 car.
But with the assumption that you're going to have to hire new, if not everybody transfers over, you'd have to hire some new ones.
I don't know what'll happen. There's any number of things that can happen. We could have officers within the OPP now who are interested in moving to this area, maybe want to transfer here. I have 2 new transfers coming to my office in the next 3 months from other areas, and they're first-class constables with 10 or 15 years of service, so they wouldn't need to be probationaries. There are probationary officers that are hired, and usually they come 1 at a time or sometimes 2, but usually only 1 at a time. So it's not that there's a whole platoon of officers being coached by someone.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Trevor Castiglione, I'm just going to use some hypothetical numbers here. Let's say we transitioned over to OPP and you took 14 officers. It's my understanding that those 14 officers are on probation even after all of the scrutiny that you put them through initially for 1 year. Am I correct with that?
I would have to verify that. I don't know the exact, I don't know the term that they're on probation for, or if they are. I would have to get back to you on that.
Okay.
Okay. I'm seeing no further questions here. I just wanted to give opportunity to any council members if they wanted to ask any questions of the OPP officers that are here. Seeing none. Okay. Did you want to make a closing statement, Ms. Davis?
Not particularly. I'd just like to thank the town of Orangeville and for allowing us to come and to answer your questions. And I'd especially like to thank the members in the audience for taking the time out of your evening and coming here to ask those questions.
Right. So, and sorry.
I would also like to say thank you to everyone who came out tonight and were patient with us and listened to everything we had to say and posed some very interesting and important questions for us. I hope that we've answered the questions to the best of our ability, and if you have any further questions, please do forward them and we will try to answer them as best as we can. And once again, thank you very much for coming out. I do really appreciate it.
Right. So, just to follow up on what Staff Sergeant Randall just mentioned, our OPP costing portal on the Orangeville website is open. It's been open for 3 or 4 months now. Any questions that anybody in the audience or at home has they wish to ask of the OPS or the OPP, please submit your questions that way. Town councilors are also available. Our email addresses and phone numbers are online at orangeville.ca. We do have additional public sessions coming up. This council wants to make this as open and transparent and educational as possible for not only the council members but for everybody here in the town of Orangeville. So I want to thank you for attending tonight, And we need to, as this is a council meeting, we need to wrap this up with a motion to adjourn. Councillor Andrews, second by Councillor Post, all in favor? Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much.